This is Freddy with Freddy Can Fly, and welcome to Troubleshooting Your RC Helicopter. In today's video tutorial, I wanted to take a look at how to troubleshoot tail wag. This is a widely discussed problem. There's a lot of different causes for tail wag, but there's also a lot of really simple ways to troubleshoot it. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down, and we're going to use my little process of elimination theory that I like to use whenever I troubleshoot my RC helicopter problems. So let's get into it, guys. Let's take a look at some of the things that may cause tail wag, some of the things you can look for to avoid getting tail wag. That way you guys can get your tails rock solid and get out there and start banging those sticks around. So let's jump into it. Okay guys, so you'll see I've got my T-Rex 600 Nitro sitting here, and I'm running the Micro Beast X Fly barless system. And let's just get hypothetical for a minute, and let's say I'm having a tail wag issue. Now, the first thing I typically do when troubleshooting any sort of tail wag issue is I'm going to ask myself, is it electronical or is it mechanical that I believe is causing the tail wag issue? Now, it could be both, it could be one, or it could be the other. So basically what I like to do is I like to start with my mechanical setup, because typically I found that in the mechanical setup you can get a lot of wag problems due to improper build, or parts being too tight or dragging on each other. So let's use process of elimination here, and let's start with mechanical problems first, and let's take a look at what mechanical things can cause the tail wag, and we'll troubleshoot it from there. If we can't solve it after mechanical problems, we now know that it must be an electronical issue causing our tail wag. So then we can scratch off mechanics, we can look at electronicals, programming, how we're mounted, and then we'll take it from there. So let's jump into the mechanics of what can cause the tail to wag. Okay guys, so here we are, we're troubleshooting our tail wag. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at the mechanics of the actual heli and what could cause the tail to possibly wag. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the heart of what could be the problem, and that is my tail servo. Now, I had found, guys, and I know you can use sub-trim on tail servos, but I've never had to use a sub-trim to 90 a rudder servo, so sometimes that little bit of sub-trim can cause unwanted drifts and problems. I've seen it happen many times. Now, if your tail servo does have sub-trim and it works flawlessly, then so be it. But that is a good thing to kind of look at, guys. If you have to use a lot of sub-trim to get a 90 on your servo horn, try using a different arm, and maybe that'll help solve your problem. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at, now guys, this is a 600 Nitro, so I do have a second, obviously I've got this mechanical arm, and then I've got another one. Some helis have just a straight shot, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the actual link arm itself. Now, the way these snap on, guys, they should snap on to where there's no up and down play. You'll see if I try wiggling the link on my ball, there's no up and down play. The whole heli's moving when I try to. But it's also perfectly smooth and free on that ball. If I have to force this and it's really hard to move it around, try getting a ball reaming tool, because you really want this to be nice and free on all of your links. The rudder especially, because if it's too tight it can cause binding on the servo, and binding can result in unwanted or odd behavior. Now, if I plug this in right now and I can hear my tail servo buzzing like there's force on it, like if I were to push against it, typically that's going to be because these are too tight on the ball. So make sure they're just nice and free, guys. That's another really important factor. Now, if you have a bell crank arm like I have here, I got this little push-pull setup. Make sure that if I snap this link off, that arm should be perfectly smooth. There should be no resistance, binding, or notching in this arm at all, because obviously that's going to translate from my servo arm to the notchiness in this bell crank arm, and then translate all the way down the length of my tail. So let's make sure that that arm is also correct. So now if we proceed down the tail a little bit more, obviously most tails are going to have these things here. They're called push rod guides. Now, this isn't the biggest factor, but in some cases I have seen this be a culprit, and you should have this push rod guide nice and straight down the length of your boom. If you guys can see that there, hopefully the white wall in the background helps, but you want a nice straight shot. Try to line those up as good as you guys can, because if they're out of sync with each other, it can cause this rod to bend and flex, which can translate to unwanted or odd behavior. Not that big a deal, I must say, but it is also kind of important. So moving on even further, now we've got the heart of the tail. Okay, now what we're gonna do, the first thing I always look at, because right now we're gonna go into a subject that's really big on tail wag. And what we're gonna do, guys, if you're watching this video and following along, go ahead and pop this link off, the link that attaches to your tail bell crank arm. Go ahead and snap that off and prepare for the next segment, and we're gonna go over some of the things you need to look for in your actual tails setup. Okay, so I've went ahead and I've disconnected my link from my bell crank on my tail. Okay, now guys, this is very important for gyro performance and tail operation, and that is that this arm, which obviously is going to move our center slider, which is going to affect our blade pitch on the tail, this whole setup, this whole assembly needs to be absolutely smooth. And it's very easy to overlook this, guys. So what I do, and when I mean smooth, I mean I'm talking ridiculous, guys, like as if there is some sort of a lubricant on there already. What I do is I move this all the way up like this. Obviously I've got my heli tipped on its side here for video purposes, but you'll notice with this moved all the way up, you know, it's gonna stay put, it's gonna stay in place. But now if I literally just tap this, look at this, look how easily that bad boy moves all the way down too. I didn't sense any sort of notching, resistance, or binding at all when I did that test. That bad boy is just nice and smooth. Okay, and also, you know, when we move it around, you'll notice, I mean, I don't have to put any force on this all the way to the left and all the way to the right. If it's all the way smooth to the left, but then I move all the way to the right, I feel a binding or some sort of resistance, that will be picked up and translated to your gyro, which will cause wag. And I'm gonna go ahead and say 3 out of 5 times, guys, this is a big source of tail wag. A lot of guys assume that it's gyro gain or it's the mounting of their sensor, so they go in and they start making adjustments, but realistically, you've just got a little bit of binding up in your tail. So as long as this is perfectly smooth, you should be able to eliminate mechanics as tail wag problems. Now, if you're asking yourself, but Freddy, mine is binding up, what can I do? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. In case yours is binding up, you'll have some ideas as to how to troubleshoot that problem. Okay guys, so I've got the heli flipped back right side up, and we're going to take a look at what to do in the event of your tail slider binding up. Now, one thing you'll notice, guys, is I have plastic blade grips, and I'm a 3D pilot, and a lot of guys say, well, you know, I want the metal grips, they're stronger, they're going to hold my tail better. Not necessarily. Now, the metal grips are nice, they add a little bit of a bling, but one of the biggest factors I'd found in tail binding is going to be this little assembly right here, if my camera will focus on it. You have these little figure 8 shaped arms that are going to connect our center slider to our actual blade grips. We've got 2 of them, one here and one here. Now, if you tighten these down all the way with Loctite, and that Loctite seeps back out, it will cause a binding effect within these arms, and it will actually bind up with either left or right travel. And I know this because I've seen it happen in mainly align helis a lot of the time. Now, you can spend all the fancy money and get the precision ball bearings set up and make your tail absolutely perfect for all this extra money, or you can simply do this, which is what I choose to do, is I like the plastic grips on my tail strictly because these have to be self-tapped with a self-tapping screw, and during that self-tap you provide the threads and have a really nice tight fit. And what I do is when I'm tightening these, I'll do one at a time. So we're going to do this one first. We're going to tighten it in all the way, and then we're going to test our movement. Now, if that movement is perfectly smooth, we can leave this one. But if it seems to bind up, back that out maybe 2 to 3 degrees at a time until you get a perfectly free movement. Then just go ahead and rotate your tail, fasten this one, and do the same test. Tighten it down all the way. If we now have binding, back it up just a little until we're nice and free. Now, on the plastic self-tapping screws, I'm not ever too worried about those coming out. You know, I mean, obviously if we're a lot of turns out and we're still binding, you've got something wrong. But I mean, if we're a good maybe half turn to maybe 1 full turn out on those screws to get perfectly smooth, I'm gonna go ahead and say you're safe, because I've been doing it for years and I've never had a tail failure ever. So that's really all there is to it in the actual mechanics. So let's take a look at if all of this is complete and we're 100% and we're still wagging. Let's go ahead and take a look at the electronical troubleshooting. Alright guys, so we've went through all of our mechanics and we're still getting tail wag, let's say, hypothetically. what we're going to now do is take a look at our electronics. Now before I go into my radio and I start making all these crazy adjustments to try to solve my problem, I mean obviously if you know it's gain related, go ahead and make your adjustments appropriately, but if you've tried messing around with gain and it don't seem to solve it, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our electronic setup. Now right here I've got my Beast X mounted, and I actually did have tail wag problems with this heli, and you'll notice a couple of things I've done here. Now one of the big important things obviously is vibration to your sensor. Now in a nitro we get a lot of vibration, so what I've done is I've used the thinner supplied sticky tape. Obviously messing around with different combinations of sticky tape can help, but I've strapped it down as hard as I could, and I placed a piece of foam underneath my gyro sensor mount and sandwiched it down so it's really dampened, and that did help out quite a bit. So obviously sensor mounting, guys, make sure it's not getting vibrated, because that's another big source of tail wag. Now on a fly barless unit you're going to see a lot of that vibration also affect the overall performance, so it's really easy to red flag if it's vibration related. Now another thing is your wires here, guys. You'll notice I've got this nice little service loop cushioned by my foam here. The cushion is actually keeping these, it's keeping a little bit of pressure underneath my row of pins. Now this service loop is crucial, guys. If I zip tie these down and pull them straight down to where there's force on these pins, that's going to shake this gyro. Always provide some sort of a free service loop on your connections to your gyro sensor. That's very important. I highly recommend you guys always do that. Now that's really all there is to say for the actual sensor and placement. Obviously make sure your connections are secure and you know, vibration. Also, if we're still getting it, guys, take a look at your blade tracking. Now even the slightest bit of blade tracking and blade misbalancing can cause vibrations, which will translate to unwanted tail behaviors like wag and things like that. It's not the biggest culprit out there, but it's nice to troubleshoot any and all options available. So take a look at your blade tracking and also your blade balancing, and that's going to be another big factor. If all else fails, guys, we'll jump into our radio and we'll start dialing our gains around. Now obviously on fly barless systems we have access to different options. The Beast X, we got tail dynamics and other tail performance features we can adjust. But basically that's all there is. If we're still getting tail wag after this, there's got to be a bent, broken, or damaged part somewhere that's causing our tail to not perform properly. So with that being said, guys, I'm going to make a video later on here on how to actually test and get the proper amount of gain for your tail. That way you know if your wag is going to be gain related or not. But we'll save that for a later video segment. Alright everybody, so that's basically going to sum it all up for troubleshooting tail wag. We went through the mechanical troubleshooting problems, the electronical, and some good ideas and tips and tricks. So I really think this video should be helpful to you guys. I hope it's helpful, and you know, use some of these and try to troubleshoot your gain, not gain, but tail related problems. They are fixable, guys, so hang in there for those of you struggling with this. You just got to really learn and understand what it is you need to do to get that tail solid. And once it is solid, you'll notice, man, it makes a really big difference in how your heli can perform. So with that being said, guys, I hope this is something you guys enjoy watching. Watch out for my next video. We're gonna actually take the heli out and we're gonna do too low of gain, too high of gain, and find the sweet spot. And we're gonna teach you guys how to troubleshoot your gain problems out on the field and how to dial in and tune your machine properly as far as gain is related. So as always, guys, thank you very much for watching. This is Freddy with Freddy Can Fly, and I'll see you guys on the next video.